everybody. So good to be back together again. You know what I mean? Don't you feel like almost normal? You know what I mean? Almost. We're getting there. We're getting to normal. Let me put this down for a minute here. So, wow, we encountered this morning in our Besorah reading a gutsy, elderly Jewish woman who knew the truth of her case. You know, she knew that she was in the right. And she, despite her humility, you know, sometimes the most humble people have the most courage, you know? It really is true. Sometimes the big shots, you know, they don't have to develop courage because their local group reinforces their whatever about them. But she had courage. And as Dave reminded us, we see this theme of humility too. But I want to suggest to you that she was motivated most of all by the fact that she knew that she was right. She knew the truth. Her case was legit. And the stakes were high. She was a widow. And she kept coming to the judge and bugging him and bugging him and bugging him until he just got tired of it and said, all right, I'll give you justice, you know. But I would like to talk with you this morning about this issue of truth and how it relates to persistence. You're showing me something, Ralph? Okay, all right, good. I thought I was getting cued here. I'd like to talk with you about persistence and perseverance and the relationship of persistence and perseverance to knowing that you know something important is true. And this has always been a big deal for me personally. I've always felt the importance of this, and I want to share it with you in some very interesting ways today. In Hebrew, we have the idea of the midot, the different qualities of character that we want to develop. And you've heard of musar, the idea of a structured plan for becoming a better person, a better Jew, through practicing different methods of growing in these qualities. And so we have the midot, these different qualities. And one of the rabbis spoke of the midat ha'emet. I'm sure many rabbis spoke about it, but the guy I was reading the other day, midat ha'emet, that is the love for truth. Now, here's the thing about truth. You'll never get it all because you're just a limited human being. What human being can encompass all the important things there are to know about life and about the world, etc.? It's not possible. It's not going to happen. But you can know some things to the point that they are so deep inside of you that you can be motivated by them to act courageously and consistently and with perseverance despite whatever comes your way. That's where I'm going this morning, the midat of truth. Or another way to put it, there's something called a Yiddish Cup. You ever hear of a Yiddish Cup? It's not a cup, it's a cup. All right? A Yiddish Cup. Kepi. I believe that comes from the Greek word kephale, which means head, and it's a loan word into Hebrew and Yiddish. And so a Yiddish Cup. What is a Yiddish Cup? A Yiddish Cup is having a kind of smarts that sees behind the superficialities and is able to get a sense of the reality of things and the truth of things that a lot of other people without a Yiddish Cup miss. But you have a Yiddish Cup and you are able to discern truth and act on it because you don't look superficially. You look deeply and you're able to see what's going on. And a Yiddish Cup often has to do with the practical application in business and whatnot. You're able to see the story and you're willing to act on it because you know and you're a knower. You got a Yiddish Cup. I like that phrase, a Yiddish Cup. Isn't that a fun phrase? I love it, you know. A Jewish head, if you will. Positively, it's that sense of truth, the smell for it. And it also has a big element of an untruth detector. At the end of Wall Street, there is a statue of a large animal. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's not a good pulpit word in this context, so I will just make the allusion. You got a statue on Wall Street censored. You get what I'm saying? Yeah? All right, am I scandalizing you? Don't be scandalized. Okay. The point is that we need to know truth and to be convinced of certain things so as to have the fortitude, the internal fortitude, to be able to continue on even though things are hard sometimes. It comes from knowing truth. And I believe that the pursuit of truth is not just a Western cultural dynamic. I believe it is a human need. The need for truth and the capacity to know truth, though we clearly recognize you'll never have it all, but you could have a good piece of it. Now, I want to tell you, in my own story, when I became a Messianic Jew, I was very motivated by this idea of truth because I came to connect with ideas that I never knew as a younger person. I was 19 at the time. Before that, I never thought about it. What did I think about it? Social life and playing football and, having fun. Playing jazz trombone. That's all I thought. That's mostly what I thought about. But when I was confronted with certain truths about Yeshua, I found I couldn't run away from them. I was truth motivated. If this is true, I'm going for it. You get what I'm saying? Did we get all clear today? Okay, good. So, over the years, I've been aware of different forms of what we call evidences or elements which indicate that our truth faith might be truthful and is truthful. Because I was not going to give up freedom and the good vibes with my family and all the other stuff if I knew something just wasn't true. I'd be willing to give up a lot if something was true. And this faith in Yeshua was presented in me, and I said to myself, and boy, it looks like it's really true. So today, I want to take a few minutes and share what I would consider a secondary or not primary kind of evidence, but nonetheless compelling in its own way and interesting, and comes from an odd source that I wasn't looking for. But in 1980, I got exposed to this, and I went, wow. I mean, it took a while to, look at it. I went, wow. And I'm hoping to evoke in you a bit of a wow right now, so that perhaps your conviction level grows and you are willing to do what's ever necessary for the truth. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a relic, a particular relic that, and I have no particular attachment to the Roman Catholic tradition. I have no experience with it and very little involvement, certainly, although I have tremendous respect for the scholars of that world and the piety of many of its people and writings, but it's not my world. We're Messianic Jews, and it's not my world. But the Shroud of Turin is so interesting. Now, let me tell you about this. So, we read in the Gospels that Yeshua is wrapped in a cloth according to common burial custom back in those days, in a cloth. And there was a legend or a tradition very early that this shroud was actually transported to different places and ended up in a cathedral in Turin, Italy. And it had traveled from Jerusalem, and then it was in Edessa in Turkey, and then Constantinople, and then during the Middle Ages in Lorraine, France, and then ultimately ended up in Turin. So what is it? It's a 14-foot by 3-foot piece of linen cloth, with what's called a herringbone weave, very common in the first century, by the way. But that's not the main thing. And on it is purported to be the image of the body of Yeshua himself. And throughout the centuries, periodically, this cloth would be shown, and it would be taken out and shown for a short time and then put away. Well, in 1898, there was a photographer named Segundo Pia. And he was commissioned to take pictures of this image which had a very light image of a man, front and back. And so he took the pictures. And in the developing room, he almost fainted because the negative image of the shroud was so incredibly detailed in terms of a man who was beaten up terribly and who bore certain characteristics that were consonant with Yeshua himself. I'm going to just detail a few of these for you so you get a sense of it. And if you've never seen a picture of this, you can go online and you can see, just look up Shroud of Turin, you'll see what I'm talking about. So one of the things that is so amazing is that this tradition of where the shroud was, it turns out that there are spores of various plants. And a fellow named Max Fry, a researcher in the 19th century, was an expert. He was a world expert in determining where things had been based on the amount of these spores of indigenous plants which can be found in fabric or whatever. He was like the world's top guy. And here's what he found. The Shroud of Turin has a majority of spores from Jerusalem and northern Judea. Interesting. Interesting. And then it had a few from Constantinople and some of these other places. Very unusual. And then what researchers began noting is the incredible accuracy of the anatomical detail of the man in the Shroud of Turin. I mean, it is really striking. So much so that you have details that you would have never expected had it been a forgery from somewhere in the Middle Ages, because that's been suggested. The Shroud is a forgery from the Middle Ages. But what scientists have noted is that even things like, think about Yeshua and think about the art of the Middle Ages. Where are the nails, the nail prints? Where are they generally put? Do you know? Any idea? In the palms of the wrists. But that anatomically is absolutely impossible because, and Roman soldiers who crucified people knew this well, that spot could not bear the weight of a body writhing on a Roman execution stake. Instead, where the place that they could nail a person was in a little place called Destot spot. It's where four small bones can converge in the wrist. And that is what the Shroud of Turin shows, not in the palms, and that is an anatomical detail which really, really, really fits. Now here's another thing. Most recently, as scientific apparatus has gotten more accurate, they've noted that in the man's eyes are two Roman leptons. In other words, a person, part of the custom, one of the customs would be to cover a person's eyes with a small coin. And the lepton, they've got the detail on it that the lepton that's pictured was minted in the year, for 4 years from the year 29 CE or 29, yes, CE, or we say AD CE, you can say whatever you like. And that's by Pontius Pilate. He's the guy who minted those coins in the man's eyes in the shroud, and it fits exactly the time frame of 29 through 34. Okay. If you were to look at the man's back, it's really tough to look at, gang. It really is, because it is covered. His back, his lower body, his legs, covered with little barbell markings from what's known as a Roman flagrum. It was an instrument of torture, and they have such clarity as to the pattern of these that they know that there were two guys, one taller than the other, on either side of the man who was going to be crucified. They would take turns probably hitting him with this flagrum, and it would be very, very gruesome. But again, it fits the times. It fits the Roman execution method, and even to the detail of we know that there were two guys, one on either side. And then there's the issue of blood. And this is something that I had not learned until about a week ago, because so much research has occurred and I haven't looked at it in a while. It's blood on the shroud. It is not pigment or some kind of coloration. It is blood. I'll tell you the type. It's AB positive. Isn't that something? AB positive. Now, there's not enough DNA to be able to, do something with it and recreate anything. That can't happen. The DNA strands are damaged, but they're able to know that it's type AB positive. And here's something really interesting. No pigment created the image on the shroud. In other words, when you paint something on, it seeps into the fibrils of the cloth. But there's none of that. There is no paint, no indication of any kind of dye or paint or anything. The image is caused by a burst of heat light which only affects the top of the outermost fibrils. There's nothing seeping in whatsoever. And the method is completely unknown how that could have happened, but that's what it was. It was some kind of burst, extreme burst of light that created the image, is what the scientists say. Okay? And here's another thing. The image is three-dimensional. In other words, unlike anything that we would normally see that would be painted, that's a two-dimensional image. This has three-dimensionality, and I can give you the machine that noted that. It's a fellow at JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory scientist, and the machine is called a VP8 image analyzer that noted this three-dimensionality. Okay? It's a totally unique image. There's nothing like it in the world. And the anatomical detail and all the rest pointed me in one direction until roughly, it was in the 90s. And something happened that I want to tell you about that shook me up. And that was the carbon dating of the shroud. Does anyone remember that? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. The carbon dating. A small piece of cloth was cut in three and sent to 3 different laboratories, and all of them came back with the dating, carbon dating, that the shroud was from the Middle Ages, from the 15th century. Now, what do you do with the cognitive dissonance here? You ever have cognitive dissonance before? You know something can't be an accident. The evidence for it is so strong for its authenticity, and then yet 3 labs say the thing is a phony. What do you do with that? Well, when you have cognitive dissonance in life, let me tell you the best thing to do. Wait. Just wait. Do you have a question mark box in your brain? Don't we all? I do. There are things I don't know. And I go, I don't know. Have to wait and figure out about that. Maybe an answer will come. Well, an answer did come. As it turns out, there was a fire in 1532 where some of the molten material from the box, the metal box where the shroud was placed, landed on the shroud and burned some elements, not a large portion, but a portion around the edge. And what some of the nuns did is they skillfully dyed some cotton cloth, not linen like the shroud, but cotton cloth, and skillfully weaved it among the fibers of the shroud so that you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know that it wasn't part of the original shroud. It turns out that the place they took these from was from the repair cloth from the 1532 fire, and that accounted for the carbon dating, and no need for cognitive dissonance. It's just an absolute established fact. That's what happened. It was not from the shroud that they took the cloth. It was from the repair. So a Yiddish Cup, in my view, says, look, this is no forgery. This is no forgery. And the implications are what's important. What it shows, now get this, everybody, this is important. It shows that the biblical accounts of the life and the death, crucifixion, and resurrection of Yeshua really look real. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that the best? It means that as we pursue truth and are trying to figure out how to live in a way like this elderly Jewish lady who had the guts to go back, she knew she was right and she was not going to give in. Similarly, we then gain confidence. We want to be like this gutsy lady in the story, and we want to be able to rise up and step out in truth, even if it's not real popular. We never have the whole truth. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty I'm sure we're wrong about, but not this one. He is risen, and it's real, and the accounts are substantiated by God providentially bringing modern science into the picture to help us. Sometimes you got to stand for truth. I'll tell you a quick story. I've never told this publicly. So in 1980, Sue and I were, Dave is 3, we were at a Messiah conference in a Messianic Jewish conference. And it was about 300 people in the room. And the master of ceremonies, the guy leading the meeting, said, I want to introduce you to this guy, and I'm just going to call him Chuck. That is his first name, but I'm not going to tell you anymore. And this guy told a story, and he talked about receiving a symphony by automatic writing, and he just needed $5,000 to get it printed. And he had traveled with Pierre Boulez, the head of the New York Philharmonic, and this and that. And he went on and on. And I want to tell you, you know that animal at Wall Street? You know which one I'm talking about? Well, my animal on Wall Street thermometer went up like, And I was watching what I believe was a deception. And I'm watching all these young Messianic Jews. I was a young Messianic Jew too. But at the end, I just stood up. And I said to the MC, excuse me, but our speaker has made some very grandiose claims. And I'd like to ask him a couple of questions. And the question I was going to ask him, I forget how I put it, a couple of questions. I remember the question I wanted to ask. Who wrote the Mephisto Waltz? Well, you'd have to be a serious classical music head to know who wrote it. Does anyone know who wrote the Mephisto Waltz? Franz Liszt. Okay. And I only knew that because a friend of mine played it. So the leader says, you sit down. So I sat down. Okay, not going to make a big scene. But I felt that I wasn't in the presence of truth. And I was mad. But what happened was, the meeting ended and we all went to lunch, at the conference. And I was persona non grata, let me tell you right now. And one guy, a friend of mine, came up and said, you really damaged the spirit in that meeting. Well, what can I do? I was indignant, and that was all there was to it. And this vibe, Well, I decided to call the New York Philharmonic. I called like crazy. And it turns out the guy was a phony, and years later, the people heading up the conference admitted it to me. I knew it. He was a phony, and he was exploiting people, and I didn't like it. But one guy came up to me on this crowded lunch line, and I feel him grabbing my arm. And I turned, and it was a guy named Harold Berman. Harold Berman was the lay leader of Congregation Ruach Israel before I knew there was a Ruach Israel. And he said to me, I just want to tell you, Rich, thank you so much for that. Because I had the same feeling. And our friendship was born. And to make a long story short, Harold, when I knew that he was leading Ruach, I decided, okay, I would check it out. And one thing has led to another. You see, standing for truth sometimes is not easy, but you do it. Now, many of you have trusted Yeshua, but there might be some people here who have not. You've kept it at arm's length. You said to yourself, it's a Bubba Meiser, who knows? People like this idea, but I have no idea it's really true. Let me tell you something. It is really true, and he wants you. It is really true, and he wants you. Not part of you, all of you. He wants you, because if it's true, he wants you. And we, as truth-motivated people, want to be that little lady, like that little lady. See, the Jewish imperative in Torah goes this way. Uvacharta b'chayim lama'an techayeh ata v'sarecha. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice, hold on to him. And so I want to say to you, it's really time to find a reason to persevere in hard truth, even when our culture is screaming at us, forget about it, this religion stuff, why are you knocking yourself out? Everyone knows that's not true. Well, there may be a lot of untruth in religion, but not this part, okay? And so it's time not to care so much about fitting in, and it's time to stand for him. It's time to find out if our claims about him are true, and to make your move if it is, and then to determine to persevere no matter what. It's time to become like the little lady who kept coming back to that unrighteous judge and who won her case. She knew she was right. The truth was on her side, and she would not give up. How much more motivated can we be when we understand that it's not some unjust judge, but it's a loving God who cares about Israel and cares about all the boys and girls in the world, and who invites us to come to him and to receive atonement and to walk with him and to show us that we love the truth. May we all love the truth. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Okay. Oh, thank you. That's not necessary. But here's what we're going to do. Let's all rise, and our cantor, Evan.